Well, it's really a thrill to be here among all these people whose work I've admired over the years. So my talk is going to be divided into two sections. First, I want to pitch a proposal that's kind of wacky, outside the box idea in the spirit of trying to come up with creative solutions. And secondly, I want to describe some of the policy work that I'm doing in the realm of replication in my capacity as the chair of the ethics committee of the International Society of Stem Cell Research. So we're all here because there is a specter that is haunting the life science research, namely the specter of non-reproducibility. And we all probably recognize that that specter is largely nourished by the fact that the drivers of the research process, which is the accrual of reputation for researchers, is misaligned with the goals of producing generalizable and robust truths. What I want to do is pitch an idea here, the notion of a research forecast, as a way to realign the incentives in research along the lines of truth production. So first, the idea of a forecast is that a person is, for some future event, offering a set of subjective probabilities for the outcome of that future event. So is it going to rain 1 week from now? A person can offer a forecast of 80% when, in fact, 1 week has passed. You can actually score the individual using something called a proper scoring rule to determine how accurate that person's forecast is. So the idea of the research forecast is to apply this fairly well-developed method from the decision sciences to the realm of scientific research. So you could imagine, in particular, scientific reports. So you could imagine a researcher who is reporting that a drug is able to shrink tumors in mouse xenografts. There are going to be some very logical kinds of events that one might want to forecast or predict that would follow clinically from that kind of basic science and preclinical report. Namely that when this drug is given to patients, there might be a tumor response above a certain threshold. The drug's going to show adequate safety, and there might be certain molecular events in tumor biopsies of patients when the drug is given to them. So the idea is that you elicit a set of events and subjective probabilities from a researcher on their research report, and then score them years down the road once those actual predictions mature. And the idea here is that this is linked to scientific reports, but in principle you could link it to grants or you could link it to schools within a controversial research realm. Now, the idea of using research forecasts builds on a basic insight of philosophy of science, which is that the way science advances is by theorizing, generating predictions from those theories, and then testing those, and then using the results of those tests to update one's set of theories, et cetera. Right now in research, part of what's really broken is that step of prediction. If you read the discussion sections of most papers, which is where most of the prediction happens, most of the prediction in papers is somewhere between vague and vacuous, making it impossible to hold researchers accountable for the kinds of projections or predictions that follow from a person's scientific reports. So there are three ways that actually formalizing people's forecasts in scientific reports would realign incentives appropriately. First, right now in the current publication economy, the drivers of accruing reputation drive expedient research design. On the other hand, if you are scoring people on the accuracy of their forecasts, you are encouraging people to use methodologies that are going to be much more probative. Number two, the drive of increased reputation in the current publishing economy encourages people to spin their results, to get negative studies and to pitch them as positives, to do a subgroup analyses, et cetera. If in fact you're going to be scored on the forecasts that follow from your report, this is encouraging people to take a very balanced assessment and also to consider or to embed their findings within the totality of evidence within the research areas. So again, that's another realigned incentive. And the other thing, way that this realigns incentives is that in the current publishing economy, novelty is rewarded. So you get a research report, you're on to the next project. Rarely are you encouraged to actually reflect back on the flaws or problems with the inferences you drew from your older reports or from the flaws in the methodologies. If in fact you are explicitly making forecasts in a formalized way, once a research report is complete and then being scored on those outcomes, that is encouraging people to reflect back on the inferences that they're drawing as well as the methodologies that they're using. Now, I'm not the first person to propose betting or something along those lines as a way to address reproducibility. Robin Hanson did this famously in the context of prediction markets. My proposal is a little bit different in that I'm linking this to particular scientific reports. There are obvious challenges that would arise in trying to implement this, feasibility issues, for example, trying to get buy-in from researchers to actually put some skin on the game in their predictions could be a little tricky. I think these are problems that an enterprising journal or a foundation could support with appropriate incentives. There's also the issue of unintended consequences. If, for example, you could imagine researchers were running studies that were testing their predictions, easy to game the system, so for this scheme to work, you would have to have a very clear firewall between the researchers offering the forecasts and the researchers that are actually testing the results. There's also the potential unintended consequences of conservatism. It's very easy to predict the weather if you live in a desert. You don't want to drive scoring in a way that is going to encourage people to do easy science. The way to address that is to collect forecasts from people who are independent of the research team, and you can actually measure not only whether people are right about their forecasts, but whether their forecasts are discordant with community opinion and score them higher if there's greater discordance. That's going to encourage people and give people higher scores for being right and eccentric. So the simple idea of this is to really restore a key function of prediction in the scientific research process and to really harness that notion of prediction and forecast to the alignment of incentives within scientific research. And now for something completely different, some of the work that I'm doing with the International Stem Cell Society. As we all know, there are a number of challenges in the stem cell research arena with reproducibility. Any number of basic science findings that are frustrated by replication attempts, problems with the reporting and design of preclinical studies in stem cells, really problems that are not unique to stem cells, similar issues with reporting in clinical trials as well. But there are particular sensitivities in the stem cell arena with these kinds of challenges stemming from the fact that there are public sensitivities around the use of human embryos and the fact that if you do the preclinical science poorly and you are putting these products into human beings, these cells can't be removed from people, and so you have continuous exposure to those, the hazards of those cells. There's invasive delivery that's used, so you really want to make sure you have the preclinical and clinical science right in the stem cell arena. The International Society of Stem Cell Research, a professional organization for stem cell research, had issued guidelines on embryonic stem cell research as well as clinical translation. As the director of the ethics committee within ISSCR, we are now merging these two documents into a single set of guidelines, and as I'm going to describe, those guidelines now really emphasize the importance of replication and the kind of themes that have been rehearsed in this meeting. So this comes up in the principles. So first of all, the principles gloss themes like transparency, integrity of the research enterprise. And that first principle in particular, we call out issues like the importance of having reliability, accessibility, and replication. So these join the kind of traditional Belmont ethical principles. We have two other ones there about the integrity of the research. We also have a section on preclinical research where we call out the importance of designing studies that are addressing threats to internal construct and external validity. We actually call out particular kinds of design principles in preclinical studies that ought to be implemented for internal construct and external validity. And we also encourage researchers to try to distinguish and label their studies as either exploratory or confirmatory. These are themes that were uncovered in my own systematic review of preclinical research guidelines that was published a few years back in PLOS Medicine and PLOS Biology. We also emphasize the importance of transparency and publication of preclinical studies in full prior to the onset of clinical reporting. And of course, we have another section on clinical studies as well, and the clinical section also endorses the use of systematic review prior to initiation of clinical testing. We have statements in there about the obligatory prospective study registration, including phase 1 or even basic science studies in human beings. we emphasize the importance of negative, inconclusive reporting and the use of reporting guidelines in publishing results. Now, whether this will have an impact on practice, I can't say. I think most of us probably have some sense of how long it takes for these to actually make it into implementation. But the key point is that by articulating a set of benchmarks, the society now can hold researchers within the society, but in principle, researchers in the broader field of stem cell research accountable for the implementation of sound research practices. Thanks.